Cody Nagel, CBS Sports, the story from Michael Penix to Jared Verse, college football's 10 most impactful transfers of the portal era. And he joins us with his list and also his knowledge. Cody, thank you very much for your time with Craig David and also Paul 365 Sports. How long did you compile, go through all the lists and have 80 people, then try to get it down to 9? How did you do this?
Yeah, this was something I worked on. I think I did kind of a first version last year with 24/7 Sports actually, and we kind of fixed it a little bit because we had included before. We had Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts in there, and we figured, they were technically pre-transfer portal era, but they kind of were in that, they transferred right before it became official, and were playing, while it was going on. But we eliminated them and tried to get it to where it was just guys that had transferred after that. I believe it was October 2018 when it officially started. But yeah, it definitely took a lot of time and a lot of thought, and it's a pretty subjective list. I mean, there's so many arguments you can make for guys, even ones that aren't in the list that I've got. But yeah, it was pretty fun to go through, and you kind of come across some names that you kind of forget that they were transfers just because, once they got to their new schools, just the impact that they had.
Who just missed it?
I think the obvious one's got to be Cam Ward, and I'm probably going to catch a lot of heat for, not including him. I would say he was probably 10.5, and you could, I would certainly listen to an argument that he should be included in the top 5 too. But I think the fact that for everything that he did accomplish offensively, and I know a lot of this has to do with the defense that he had no part in, but to not make the ACC title game and not make the playoff, it's kind of hard to say, okay, his impact on this program was massive because they ultimately didn't get to where they wanted to go.
How much debate was there around Michael Penix as the top choice there at number 1?
Yeah, that was definitely the big debate. And, I think just because, I know Washington had success before, before Kalen DeBoer got there. Chris Peterson obviously took them to the playoff before when it was the 4-team format. But I think just how that program was offensively when Penix was at quarterback. I mean, he was always at the top of, passing stats for nationally, only losing, 3 games or so during his 2 years there. I mean, to get Washington to the national championship game, I mean, without him, they don't do that. I mean, I can't even remember who their backup quarterback would have been, but he fought through. I mean, remember the national championship game? I mean, he was basically hobbling off the field every time the offense would come off the field just because his ribs were hurt. And so yeah, I think that's kind of why we went with that. And I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but that was ultimately who we settled on.
Quarterbacks on this list: Penix, Justin Fields, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. So 4 of them, but I like it the way it's mixed up a little bit. How much did you put into, Paul, what was it, Jordan Travis at Florida State, who actually a lot of people forget that he transferred to Florida State?
Overwhelmed by your inbox? Clean Email is here to help. Organize, clean, and manage your emails with powerful automation tools. Say goodbye to spam and clutter and enjoy a stress-free inbox. Try Clean Email today at cleanemail.com. That's CLEAN email.com.
Yeah, that's probably another one that's right on that, that cut line that probably could be included, but ultimately didn't make it. Yeah, I mean, he was having a Heisman Trophy season before that injury. I think that's probably why we didn't include him, just because he ultimately didn't finish out. And I know he had, the season before that, or that season before that too. But yeah, I think that the injury and not being able to kind of finish that off was kind of why we leaned against not including him.
Cody Nagel with us on the highest impact or most impactful college football transfers during the actual official start of what was the transfer portal era in 2018.
When you get into, did you kind of look at some of the inverse too of like some of the bigger name guys that didn't pan out? Like when you get into these things, it's kind of like opposition research, I guess, Cody, like, okay, because you got to compare. Let's compare, Jared Verse to another defensive end that was more highly touted that hit the wall.
Yeah, obviously you're going to go through and see kind of where we had or where 24/7 Sports had some of the guys ranked and kind of how they outperformed. I would say for the most part, if I had to look back real quick, but that most of these guys were probably expected to be impact transfers or were rated pretty high. I can't think of one on here that was probably a guy that came out of nowhere. Maybe Jared Verse, if I can remember correctly where he ranked, but a guy coming from an FCS school probably wasn't really on too many people's radar, but ultimately makes the list and probably played a big impact on Florida State being in the mix for that playoff there and winning the ACC title. So yeah, I mean we looked back on how these guys compared to certain positions too.
I'm just sitting here trying to remember what it was like pre-transfer portal. Like I kind of remember, but man, it's just made things so much more interesting, hasn't it, over the last few years? I mean, there's definitely been for some worse scenarios, but I think ultimately, despite all the sky is falling rhetoric and everything, I mean, damn, it's added some spice to this whole thing every year, has it not? Yeah,
for sure. And like Jared Verse, I mean, without the transfer portal, maybe he doesn't, get to Florida State and, maybe it's not as easy for him to, or maybe he's got to sit out a year or something like that. Or, maybe it's not as easy for a guy like Michael Penix Jr. to, transfer to Washington and reunite with Kalen DeBoer, who was his offensive coordinator at Indiana. There's just a lot of those success stories that are out there. And then there's obviously the other end where guys move and it doesn't work out. And, then they're kind of forgotten about a little bit because they didn't pan out.
I love the fact you had Olawati, Teeny, from Michigan, who was at a couple of schools, Air Force and then Virginia, to make sure there's an offensive lineman on this list. And Mac, I didn't really know much about him when he transferred to Michigan. And then when they had that great run, he was solid, Cody, as a rock as an offensive lineman. And now I think starting with Seattle in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's with Seattle. Yeah. But yeah, just for a guy to come over and be that anchor, even if it was for just one season, they win the Big Ten, they go to the playoff. Was that the year they lost to Miami, or not Miami? Excuse me. They lost in Miami to Georgia, I think. But yeah, just to come over and be that anchor at center, and walks away with the Outland Trophy and the Remington Trophy, and I'm pretty sure he's the only guy in program history to win both of those. So yeah, that was important for us to include some sort of offensive lineman or guy that made an impact like that.
Kenneth Walker at number 3. I remember when I was scrolling through the article, I was like, well, I mean, he was really good. And then like when I read your justification for it, literally got $95 million for Mel Tucker, which I don't know if anybody else on the list can say that they did that. Well, maybe a couple, but like really did that for a coach that, quickly showed that sans Kenneth Walker, he wasn't maybe as good as he wasn't worth that $95 million.
Yeah, I think his value is one that's definitely increased. If you would have made this list, 2 years ago, when they're coming off that season or whatever, he's probably not that high up there. But the further you get along, and with how that whole Mel Tucker era ended, and Michigan State still struggling with trying to get back to how they were before. I think it made a pretty good argument to put him pretty high up on the list.
Jaden Daniels, we have fun. He's LSU, obviously a great player now after 1 year with Washington in the NFL. And the fact that Arizona State had him at one point, it is incredible the number of really good players, not just because they transferred, but how good they were. Who on this list do you think is the most underrated of the 10 that you have in your top 10?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say probably Jaden Daniels or Travis Hunter. I mean, I just think you can't put a value on how much of an impact Travis Hunter had for Colorado and playing both sides. His impact on offense was tremendous. His impact on defense was tremendous. it's just kind of mind-boggling to think, a player can play that many snaps, also at altitude. I mean, you think Boulder's up there in altitude, that it's going to impact a guy like that. So yeah, he's probably one that I would have liked to have a little bit higher up. But there's the guys you have ahead of him, or the guys that I had ahead of him, Caleb Williams, Caleb Downs, Kenneth Walker, Justin Fields, and Penix. I mean, it's pretty hard to argue that he should be against those or be above those two. So yeah, it was definitely a difficult list to put together.
I know this would be impossible off the top of your head, or maybe it's not. When you started going down the list of all of the candidates, and again, there's a bunch of them, dozens probably, to get down to 10, was there a name that popped up that you went, damn, I forgot about him?
I mean, Olu was definitely one of them that came up, just because you're not really always thinking about offensive linemen. The names that come to mind are all the quarterbacks. I mean, Jamison Williams, that was one that I kind of forgot about too. The wide receiver from Alabama. They probably win that national title if he doesn't get hurt. I believe it was in like the second quarter. And then, I think it was Georgia that made the comeback there. But so, yeah, that's one that, I wasn't really thinking off the top of my head as I'm going through it.
Cody, thank you very much for your time, man. Good stuff. Cody Nagel, 247 CBS Sports with us, 10 most impactful college football transfers